Welcome to the Elemental Lifestyle Podcast. The last few podcasts have been really incredible conversations about the protector, the dark masculine, and today we're going into a new space, which is exciting. I welcome David Reed to the podcast. I am your host, Katrina Starr. I have changed my name. And I'm very excited about the places of growth that we're all allowing here. I am the Alchemist for Extraordinary Men. And today we are celebrating a conversation about real growth that is possible for each of us. David Michael Reed is a self-love for impact coach. And his vision is one of a multiverse-wide global society. His philosophy is based on his journey from sleeping on the gang-infested streets of Compton to a mansion in the suburbs of Overland Park, Kansas, within the span of a few months. And he believes his unique perspective of seeing spirituality and the human attempt at prosperity at the opposite ends of the American societal spectrum is the key to personal and collective advancement. So with that, I am excited to have David here sharing his voice and his message. I'm grateful for all of the support over the last 4 years for this podcast. I've also launched a new podcast called Love the Destroyer. And you can also subscribe to that. I will put the link in the notes, and you can connect with Michael at gameofunity.com. And then also in the next upcoming weeks in early March, you can also check my website out at Katrina Starr, that's 2stars.com. All right, with that, let's jump right into this incredible conversation about spirituality, abundance, believing in yourself, and really that place of self-love. Welcome to the Elemental Lifestyle Podcast. I am Katrina. I'm changing my name to Starr now. So Katrina Starr for all of you who have listened in the last 3 years. Really excited for what wants to happen. It's an evolution, and I welcome here today David to the podcast. Welcome, David.
Thanks, Katrina. Appreciate it.
I'm grateful to have you here. So where are you from in the world? I want to know where you're residing right now and what brings you here to this space today.
Yes, awesome. Thanks a lot. So right now I am in Kansas City, Missouri, and I've been here since about 2016. I moved here from the Compton in like South Central Los Angeles area around California right in 2016. So it's been a lot of just following the synchronicities and listening to myself and just really tapping in to follow what I call the spiritual breadcrumbs that have led me to just to be here speaking with you right now.
That's awesome. I'm really grateful. And David, I connected to you really in that space of the mystic, right? Like I could sense that piece and that connection. So I honor who you are, how you're showing up in the world, and what you're doing. I'm really intrigued by the Compton to quantum that you're sharing with the world. And thank you for listening to your intuition and really being in that space of service and creativity and community. So from one beautiful soul to another, and to all those who are listening here, what is it that you want to share right now, to speak to? What's some of the things that you've seen that people are working through, and what is it that you are really excited about in people's transformations?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that question, Katrina. Um, and I just really, I think it speaks to, I really want to talk about how I even developed the Compton to Quantum method and what it really means, as far as speaking about the kinds of things that I see people going through and that I'm really excited about the transformations that are taking place. And so it really started whenever, look, it was about 2010, 2011, whenever I was in Compton. And yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people know about Compton. It's very famously, it's heavily war-torn gangs, drugs, that kind of violence that are going on there. And but it just happened that I happened to have, I guess, what I call a spiritual awakening. I feel like I was always being tapped on the shoulder. But at this one point, when I was in Compton, I just had my heart burst open. And so I had this sort of cognitive on one hand, I'm thinking, oh, these new thoughts about love and light and being able to connect with people in a new and fresh way. But it was just completely in contrast to what was going on and what I was actually seeing, being a part of. I mean, seeing the hearse everywhere and the helicopters always flying overhead and the rampant homelessness problem that was going on. So it was this dichotomy, and I was just thinking, I just had so much love for everything, for the gangsters and for everybody who was seemingly downtrodden, and and so I realized that I was going to have to make some changes within myself in order to be able to, first of all, help myself out, and then to come back and be able to help these other people, which I just recently fallen so madly in love with. And so I did. I started reaching out to the universe, and I fully believe that whenever you start reaching out to the universe, she starts reaching back to you. And so all of the people, places, things, ideas, inspirations, opportunities started coming into my path. Really, I was starting to clear house internally, so I was able to recognize these things that were happening. And as I just was able to just have faith and take the next step, that's one of my key principles: just take the next step, even if you can't see the whole thing. And as I started to do that, and I think I was able to do that in a really unique way, because I was in this position where I had nothing to lose. I mean, I was literally sleeping in a parking structure at this time. And so I really had the ability to see, this is what society wants me to do. This is what everybody's telling me that you have to do. Well, I'm going to see what happens whenever you don't. I'm going to see what happens whenever I follow this intuition. And so I did, and I just started following the steps, and I started documenting everything that I did, and I started realizing all of the different mindsets that were helping me to create these changes. And as I just watched my life just slowly expand and grow, and the people that I love are coming into my experience, and the places are coming into my experience, and the people that I'm there to help were coming into my experience, it just became very clear to me that this is what I was here to do, and that I could help people in a very succinct way by helping them go over the same processes and mindsets and actual actionable action steps that got me to me where I am now and on my path.
Thank you for sharing openly and really heartfelt. I can feel the transformation that you have allowed. Awakenings can really be a place of incredible chaos and beauty as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the one thing, right? What in the place of these awakenings that you see the war-torn places, right? Within our communities, but also within ourselves. I feel like there's like these places of great tension and battling that we're like drawn to in a way, but knowing that we can take steps every day. Like you said, it's taking that next step.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you said that about the war that's going on out without, but also how that is a reflection of what's inside. And I think that's a key part to my process, is realizing that we have the game stick, what I call the game stick, and the controller to the entire universe, but we have it inside here. And I think that is the whole key to everything that I'm talking about, is that everything that we see on the outside is a reflection of what's inside. And so whenever we look at places like Compton, whenever we look at places that it seems like spirituality has passed over, then what we're looking at is a part of ourself that has yet to be integrated. And so whenever we look at these places, like whenever I was elevating my life state, in a very short amount of time period, I moved from being on the streets of Compton to living in a mansion in one of the most affluent neighborhoods in the whole country. And I noticed that as I was able to shift and take in and notice different spiritual aspects of myself, what I was seeing is that there was a huge, very close correlation and similarity between the energy that I was feeling and sensing in Compton and the energy that I was feeling and sensing in Overland Park. And so we have this idea that there's this lack of spirituality, that there's this lack of compassion that are in these areas. And I think that is my whole opportunity to be that bridge and to realize that we can learn so much from the spirituality that does exist in abundance in Compton and in those areas. And there's also things that they can largely learn from us. And we start to realize that this is just integration. We're just integrating different parts of ourselves. And whenever we do that, I've seen the way that people come together and we can create amazing, profound changes. And those are the shifts that I believe that we need to create the solutions for the problems that we face today.
Yes, 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 yes. Okay. Like, I moved in 2006, I moved to a neighborhood that was called Hilltop in Tacoma, right? And I did a big, in the 80s, it was, there was gangs and, but I ended up, moving there. I was terrified, right? Like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be, owning and living there. And it was actually so rooted, so grounded, connected. There was all this chaos, but there was so much depth and realness, right? A ability to accept the interdependence that's needed. Like okay, this is interesting. This is coming through. So the interdependence that's needed. I was craving that. So that's why I ended up moving there. And I kind of had some major awakenings in 2011, 2012 as well. So what is it that Compton is showing us about interdependence that we don't see it in these places of wealth where we would consider, oh, everything is okay. And, the perception, right? What is it? I feel like there's some things that you want to speak to here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a really great question. And I believe that the answer to that question is what we have a great opportunity to realize right now. And that is what is unfolding as we are integrating more and more. You're talking about going to these places, and that was kind of my thought. I was like, why am I moving to Compton? What is happening here? And what I feel like is there's an amazing opportunity, because whenever I first got to Compton, I was like, bars on the windows locked, doors. I was like, I'm not doing any of that. But as I just started continuing to realize and pay attention to my heart that was bursting open, I started looking at things with a new principle. And I started looking at things from a different perspective. And I started realizing that I was protected. Like, that was the thing, is like, there's a lot of fear in there, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I can't behave in this certain way. And I was even told that by certain people who were like, oh no, you have to be hard, you have to act this way, you have to do that, and I believe that. So like I internalized that, and I was like, wow, so my safety was tied to my lack of vulnerability. But then whenever I was like, just clear all that, and it was like, you know what? I know that I'm safe. I know that I'm protected, and I know that I'm here to shine this light. And so I would just go out and I'd be like, you know what? I'm just going to smile at people. Even if it's the most shadiest character, and I think that, my whole red flags are all going to go off inside and all that, but I'm going to do it anyways. And what I noticed whenever I did that is there might be a scowl originally on somebody's face, but after you just walk by and smiled to them, then it would just give them permission to do the same thing. And then you would see that smile was just right behind that scowl. right? It was just right behind it. And I think that when you're asking the question, like, what is this message that we have to teach each other? What is this thing? And I think that there's so many things. And the more that I pay attention to it, the more things that I do find. But that is one of them, is this opportunity to have sweeping, huge changes in the areas of vulnerability. And so, I mean, there's huge areas of entrepreneurship, and it's forced, right? There's not a lot of options. There's not a lot of outlets. There's not a lot of opportunities. So you see the creativity that people come with, right? And it comes from, there is a level of compassion and working together and building something from literally nothing, right? And there's this whole aspect of that. And I just know, like, I know more than I know anything, that it's like when we introduce these, because you can tell by the conversations, you know, there's these big ideas, but they end up coming out in these seemingly trivial ways. And we know that once we just introduce, like, did you know that this was available? Did you know that you could do this? You know, and whenever we just introduce just that little bit of knowledge and opportunities, then it's just going to take off, and it's just going to cause a fire, you know, just a hay fire that's just going to spread. You know, I mean, it's a pressure cooker area. I mean, Compton it's a couple of blocks, you know, and, you know, you've got like the first billionaire rapper that came out of there. You've got, you know, the Venus and Serena Williams. You've got Richard Sherman, who went to Stanford and then went to the NFL. And coming out of this tiny little block. So you see the opportunities and the opportunities and then the ability that you can to come up out of there and do something huge. Right. But it's like right now, it's only a few of the people that are doing it. Right. And if we just like shift and show them some of the things that we're doing over here, and we can learn so much from them doing what they're doing with nothing as well. And it's just a different way to integrate different parts of ourselves. And the more that we work together, then we see. I mean, I think that's probably the biggest lesson that I want to talk about. And I mean, in my process, it always starts from the inside, but then whenever it comes on the outside, and whenever it's in this exterior mode, whenever people get together in the more far apart and different than their demographics are, the more diverse they are, then the bigger the impact they have whenever they come together, because they've gone and they've had their separate experiences. They've learned all these different things. And whenever they come together, it's like, oh, well, now I have this other resource that you've done, you know, that is wildly separate from anything that I've even been able to think about, because those tools and those building blocks are not even within my awareness. So the more different that people are, the more diverse the people are that come together, that's what causes in my experience, that's what's caused the biggest, most profound shifts.
And when you're saying that, I just hear like the willingness to play. Right? The willingness to get your hands in the pot, make the soup, create the mud, whatever analogy, you know, the willingness to play, and the acknowledge. What I hear from you is the acknowledgement to know you don't have to come with the perception of all this stuff, right? You can come as you are, because that's exactly what we need, is just you, the podcast listeners, all these people, just come as you are. You don't need all these other things to be able to contribute and to give and to make massive changes, right? I mean, that's what I hear, the willingness to just show up.
That's exactly right. And that's really incredible that you use that word right now about showing up, because that's been my attention, is really just showing up. That's what we need to do. Instead of finding somebody on the street that looks different from us and like wanting to cross the street because we're afraid of them, it's like really having the fortitude to establish those connections, you know, realizing that there's something in it for you and something in it for them. And together you can create something that's bigger than the sum of each individual part. Right. And whenever like I said, having the fortitude to form those bonds and those connections, and then being able to mine and being able to play in those bonds, like you were saying, absolutely. It's and then being able to play in those bonds and mining those bonds for our treasure. I talk a lot about mining those bonds for our treasure, you know, and it is about play. Like, that's why my brand is called Game of Unity. And it's because unity, that I think, is it's the principal thing that we need to cultivate before we can make any of these changes. And then game, because it's supposed to be fun. You know, I think that we have this preconceived notion that that's going to be tedious, and this is, you know, we have to look at our privilege, we have to look at it's going to be so hard. But I don't believe that at all. I think that we are here to play. And I think that whenever we start to see that, when we start to make these connections, you'll start to see it as absolutely fun. It's one of the most profoundly fun things that you can do. Having your perception changed for the better, because you have a better opinion of this person who you thought might be kind of sketchy before. That's amazing. Whenever you see this smile come out of a frown or a scowl because of the way that you showed up, you just showed up and gave them permission to show and to emote the way that they really are, and the way that they truly come, the place where they truly come from. That's a form of just bliss. It's a form of absolute bliss. It's the bliss that we absolutely need. But as I was saying, it starts from inside. It's within us. So it's not like we have these huge things that we have to go out and do. Now it's gonna look like that, you know, but it's gonna start from us just making these tiny shifts from within.
You know, you talk about bliss in the space of the first time that I connected with that feeling of bliss. It was kind of like a kundalini. It was energetic. It was in a dream. And it was in this really messy space, right, of a dream. There was literally like poop everywhere. But I I didn't listen to the judgment that I would have normally listened to. I accepted my truth, which was, I knew that this was showing me that it's time to just let it all come out, right? And in that space, I felt that bliss that I had never touched before. That was bliss where I could just be me, right? And I feel like that's what you're sharing here. That's that place of when someone else can also be themselves, and they can show the place of who they are. I mean, we talk about vulnerability. Vulnerability is awakening. Awakening is vulnerability. Like, it's all there, right? Being able to just accept and show up as we are. And also, I mean, isn't there something, okay, I'm going to ask this question because in my own experience back in January, I was terrified of like really connecting in conversations with men. I had struggled with some places of a very intimate relationship that was perceived dangerous, right? And so I projected that onto others not feeling safe, right? But I was strong enough to know that I can have conversations, right? So I reached out to people who were terrifying to me. Like, it was terrifying. Like, I didn't know, what to expect. I had no idea. But I did that, and it provided the most incredible understandings. They surprised the holy heck out of me.
Yeah.
Of who they were and how they showed up, and provided the most intense places for me to heal myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that's what I feel like there's something you want to share along those lines for us to just be brave enough to just say, hey, I want to talk.
Absolutely.
And it's terrifying, right?
Absolutely. And that's what I'm talking about, the vulnerability and the having the courage to form those bonds, right? Because that's whenever like, that's the self-war part, right? It's I am who I think you think I am, right? So we're always putting these projections out there and looking at ourselves from other people's perspective. And whenever we look out, it's like we don't see the world how it is. We see it how we are, right? I don't see people how they are. I see my reflection of them. And so it's the whole thing about run to the roar, right? Those areas where you're scared of, and that's like really like sketch, like, oh, I don't know about that. that's where your opportunities are. That's where it is showing you where your ability to make those shifts within you that's going to create those changes seemingly on the outside. And so that's why, so like in my 6-step Compton to Quantum method, the very first step is it's the obligation shredder, right? And I think that it's my favorite step, because I think it's, first of all, it's what I've discovered in my path and in my readings and in my studying and experience, why other coaching programs, why other any kind of programs don't really work. And I feel like it's because we start off with these layers of obligation. If it's from society, from our parents, from our kids, from our teacher, preacher, whatever, there's some obligation that we're putting onto ourselves. And whenever we're able to shed that, and that's why it's the very first step, whenever we're able to shed that, and it's also the reason why people they struggle with self-love, right, and self-acceptance. Because they're trying to do something and it's really difficult, and the reason is because that's not what they're here to do. They're working on somebody else's goal. They're working on somebody else's dream. And whenever we can drop all that and get vulnerable and have the courage to shed all that obligation and look at, like, what do I really want? What do I really desire? How do I really want to see the world? And whenever we go into that, then we can go out and we look at other people, and it's like, oh, I want to see the world as this beautiful place where everyone supports one another. And then that's when that's the way that you show up. And I always say you dress for the battle that you're gonna attract, right? So it's like, if you come out here with like this armor and I'm gonna scowl at everybody, I'm gonna protect myself from all this. Well, then that's what you're gonna get, and you're training the world how to deal with you, right? So if you come out with armor, you're gonna get a battle, right? But if you come out drenched in compassion and empathy and expecting this beautiful connections, then and that's the way that you present yourself to the world, well, then that's what you're going to get. And this is stuff that I didn't think about. I didn't think that at first either. Like, okay, that seems kind of crazy, but you know what? I just tried it and I listened to it, and that was the outcome that I saw. And it was just like, wow, cool. If this is true in Compton, right? Like, where else would this not be true at, right? If it was going to be not true somewhere, it would be true in Compton, right? But it was true there. And so just really being able to dial in on this process of doing this self-work and changing that self-war into self-love, and then having that, I call it self-love for impact, because then it just overflows within you, and then it spills out into your society. And then you notice your life start changing. You notice your abundance start coming in. You notice your compassion start to creep in. And then you see that just as you just show up that way, people start to react to you differently. And people start to wonder what's going on with you. And they want a little bit of that because it's very attractive. And so that's what my 6 steps, Compton to Quantum, are all set to realize all of the unity principles that help us to develop these things within ourselves, which then creates the abundance and the magnificence and joy and bliss that we desire.
Oh, for everyone, for all of us, I just celebrate everything that you just shared. Breathe that in, everyone. Just feel that. That those places of shedding those obligations, really asking yourself what you really want, in this life. I think you just nailed it there, David. Those places. So loving ourselves more, right? By accepting ourselves, releasing those obligations, the conditioning. What would you say? I see you have an amazing shirt. It's got the dollar signs on there. I love it. I feel, what's the most shocking thing that has happened for you in your life? That's a question that's coming through. And I honor whatever you share here, but I feel like there's something that you really want to speak to that can resonate with a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. It's an interesting question. The most shocking thing that has happened to me. And I mean, I could answer this so many different ways, but I think that the way that would be the most connective and useful is to talk about I've been recently talking and posting a lot about finding the magic in the mundane. And I think that that is overall the biggest realization, is that magic is real, right? And the thing that's the most shocking is the connection to it, right? Because I mean, I would think that, like, you know, a lot of times we think like, oh, magic is like abracadabra, and then something just like it's gonna fall out of the sky, or just poof, it's gonna be there, right? And you know, so a lot of times when you say like magic, people get a little bit like tongue in cheeky a little bit about it. But I think that the biggest realization, the biggest aha moment, the biggest surprise is when you realize how magic unfolds and how you can relate to making these shifts within, which then manifest on the outside in your society and in your reality. What happens is, because whenever it's in the process of it, you're just taking the next logical step, right? You're just working on yourself and paying attention to these inner beckonings that have always been there, but you're starting to listen to it, and you're starting to make these shifts within you. And then you just notice like, oh, this thing happens, right? Well, it's just the next logical step. It's never happened before before you started this process, but now like that little thing happens. And then that little thing happens, and then this little thing happens, and then it's like, oh, this opportunity for this car came in because you met this random person, and then they need to get rid of it for some reason, you know, and they thought of you because of your situation, and then you have this car, you know, and so it's like, I think the biggest realization was whenever I was, you know, I had moved to Overland Park, and I'm in this mansion with my girlfriend at the time, and the two kids and the two dogs, and you know, this thriving community, and all of this. And I was standing up in the balcony, and I was looking over at the pool, and it hit me. It was like, whoa, this is the exact situation, the exact surroundings, the exact people and opportunities that I was thinking about when I was laying in the parking structure in Compton, looking up at the moon, like, I know I can do better than this, right? It's like, all I did from that point was just follow the next step. But then one day you realize, wow, I've been doing the work, and this is it. And I think that is the most amazing thing, because when that happens, you know, you're not supposed to be able to do that, right? Like I was homeless in Compton. Like, I shouldn't be in a mansion, and like 2 months later, like that shouldn't happen. But whenever it does happen, you know, you're like, wow, what else can I create? Who else can I help? How else can I expand? Who can I share this with, right? Because that is whenever you are part of the magic. And I think that is what really sprung me to create the 6-step Compton to Quantum method, and to just want to come on here and share it with you and your wonderful audience, because there is magic, and it happens every day, in every moment, in every glimpse, in every look, in every smell, in every sensation, and everything that's beyond that and under that and around it. It's everywhere. And whenever you see it, and whenever you realize it and line up with it, that's the most mind-blowing thing that I can think of, that we are the conscious creators of our experience. And the way to do it is to go inside and to tweak the game, to tweak the game stick, the controller to the universe, but it's inside.
You know, you speak, oh my goodness, there's so many similarities here in this place of magic is real. On my, like, you know, my epitaph would be magic is real. That's like, my desire is for people to know that magic is real.
Absolutely.
And so you speak that place as you're sharing. What I hear is that there's a sense of stillness and calmness when you arrive to that moment of realization, right? Like, in that moment of realization, it was, I mean, because I've experienced it as well. It's just like, oh my, wow. Right.
Yes.
But it's that stillness. It's not the chaos so much. It's that moment of like, oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it is. And that stillness is the foundation behind the whole creation. I think as Yuval Noah Harari, who in his book was talking about that space between stimulus and response, right? And so in the chaos, like all of this chaos and all the information that's coming at us, but we, especially as humans, we have a unique ability. Like a lot of organism is just the stimulus causes the response, and there's no discernment or ability to do anything behind that. So whatever happens, they just spit out this. Like that's what like a computer program, this in, this out. But we as humans have this unique and awesome, amazing, profound ability to expand that space in between the stimulus and the response. We can play in that space between the stimulus and response. So all of this stuff, all the information coming in, and we're programmed like from a young age to just do it. Just, oh, this happens, so I gotta do this. But the problem is that programming happens from a mind that's 5 years old and younger. So it's like we need new programming. We need new ways to respond to certain stimuli. And the way that we do that is by expanding and playing in that space between stimulus and response. And we do that by that groundedness, by that stillness, right? It's like we want to be grounded enough to understand. I mean, so I call it dealing with tension. It's one of my unity principles that we talk a lot about in step one. But it's like whenever that thing happens and it causes that response in your body, and you're like, and it starts to well up, and you have a mind to react, right? The way that you always have. But whenever we're grounded, right? And whenever we are still, and we're able to say, oh, there's that feeling. There's that stimulation. There's that thing. And we can play in this space between and say, okay, well, normally I would do this. And here's the outcome whenever I do this. And it's not something I want. All right. I'm still in this space. Yes, here's that response, that I have that feeling in my body. What do I want the outcome to be? Okay. And how do I respond in this moment towards that end? Right. And being able to think about that. And so it all comes from, like you said, it all comes from that stillness. That's the basis behind everything. And being able to maintain and stay in that space. It's the same thing. That's what obligation is. It's like whenever somebody comes to you with a desire or a demand or a request or anything, I mean, we sort of have it ingrained in us that like we have to do that. We have to take it on. Oh, you have this desire. Okay, so are you saying that I need to do something? Should I do that? It's like we have this whole obligation thing. And so I teach a lot about being able to really, it's really just about being vulnerable. It's about being honest and clear, and being able to say no to people. And being able to say no to situations and things that are not aligned. Because whenever you say yes to something that you're not a heck yes to, then you're saying no to yourself in the future, to some other part. So it is all about that stillness, that place of stillness, and being able to connect to your higher purpose, your higher self, or whatever you want to call it, for sure.
Thank you, David. Thank you for just really opening up that place. I mean, I can feel that stillness, that calmness, that ability to expand. Like you said, that, that expansion between the stimulus and the response is so huge. We learned so much, imprinting so much as children. And I see it in my 8-year-old son, right? I'm working with that place of expanding, these stimuluses that come in, and his ability to be able to just go, oh yeah, I can sit with this, right? or not.
Yeah.
But let him learn, let him be able to identify that. I think it's so important, and to not shame, blame, critique. So much of the time I feel, so much of the time when we look for that chaos, or we're like going for that, it's because we're in that panic, right? It's like it sets off us, that stimulus does something to us. right? And then it's like, oh, we've got to respond, right, to control the damage, or, it's a place of of huge uncertainty.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it is a place of huge uncertainty, and it's a place of fear, right? I think that's really what it is that it's evolutionary fear. Everything that's happening in our world and in our mind is trying to keep us safe, which is just telling us how dangerous everything is. And that is a huge part of changing, alchemizing the self-war into self-love, because we know in our heart, we know at our deepest, truest self that we're safe, right? And then we're here to expand, we're here to connect, and to shine, right? But we have these minds that are keeping us safe, right? And they're not really keeping us safe. We don't need to be kept safe. We are safe, but we still have this evolutionary part of our brain that's telling us that we need to be safe. And so creating this self-trust, which to me, that's self-love, right? Is because you are believing yourself, right? You have the truth inside you, but you're believing yourself. You're not taking on all the obligations from anyone else. You are really in tune with yourself, and you know the decisions and the expansions that you need to make. And so that's why I think that, like, the steps 1 and 2 of the Compton and Quantum, the C2Q process is, I mean, they really go hand in hand, because the first one is the obligation shredder, where we get rid of all that. We get rid of all that obligation so that we have this bright being that is now shining the way that we were meant to do. And whenever that happens, the next step, the first step is the quantum obligation shredder, and the second one is your quantum intentions, your quantum vision, right? Because now that we're in this newly shiny place, authentic, vulnerable place, then of course the things that we're trying to do and the future that we see for ourselves is going to look different, right? Because we're looking at our place of authenticity rather than looking at my place with a little bit of mom in there and a little bit of my husband in there and a little bit of my, it's a little bit of everybody else trying to tell you where to go. And they might love you, but they're basing their decision on their own experiences and their own fears and their own shadows. And so you're taking all that in, and it creates war, it creates chaos, it creates distrust. Right? So we want to take all of that and get rid of all the obligation, and then line up all the pieces within us so that we're aiming in this direction. And that direction is always, I hardly ever have to introduce step 2, because it just happens automatically. Like, once we start getting rid of obligation, people are like, oh, well, this thing that I was trying to do, like, I don't want to do that anymore. And I'm just like, yeah, of course you don't. You never wanted to do that. You were doing that because somebody else was telling you or influencing you to do that. You didn't have self-love. You didn't have self-trust. There was a self-war going on. And now that we're lining that up, of course, it's pointing in a different direction.
I adore every part of what you just said. And I think the biggest, and it works, it really does, when you release those obligations. That the interesting part about that too is sometimes our perceived obligation, or our perception of what we think somebody else wants mm-hmm. us to do, right? That perception is like not even on point at all. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it is very on point, and we really have to be really honest with that, and to acknowledge that impact of that. And to be really honest, and sometimes that can be some of the most painful things, is when we realize our closest friends or family really are so bound by the conditioning and the obligations that they had, that they don't know how to accept the places of someone else really living in their truth and being vulnerable and being open.
Yes. And I really wanted to say something about that. So I'm glad you brought that up, because in the first step, one of the key principles that we work with is the statement that the best thing that you can do for anybody else in your life is to do what's best for you. And so I work like that's how we open up, and we see. I want to see people's relationship to that statement, right? Because that's one of the biggest things that I feel like people face. One of the biggest fears that people face whenever they're going through these shifts is like leaving people behind, right? Like, here's these people who are a big part of our life, and if I'm making these shifts and now I'm not doing this thing for them anymore, and now how are they going to treat me, and will they withhold their love from me, and will we even have any love, and all this kind of stuff. That's one of the hugest things that comes up. And so I like to address that right off the bat. And just with that statement, it's like, you know what, the best thing that you can do for that person is to do what's best for you. And I think that shows up in several ways. For one, it's that you are creating your story, right? So you're not taking in, because I did this for so long. I would just give up my power, and I had somebody, usually, some person that I had an attraction to, or some kind of relationship with, and I would give my power completely over to this person, and they would be creating for me, and it would just not come out the way that I would want it to. And it was when I got vulnerable and courageous and cut those ties and started creating for myself, then first of all, the first thing that I noticed was the things in my life started coming the way that I wanted them to. But the other thing that I noticed is that it gave that person who was caring for me an awesome opportunity, right? Because before they had hooks in me, right? And a lot of the stuff, like anything that they gave for me, there's also something in it for them too, right? There was something that they were getting. And now whenever I take that away, now they're also forced to do that for themselves. And they're forced to tap into their power, and they're forced to create the self-love that resides and wants to come out of them as well. So both of your lives start to enhance. And what we always notice, it's anecdotal, but it's like every single time that one of two things happens. Either that person falls away and does their work exactly like they need to, and goes through the processes and stuff that they need to, and then they end up elevating, and then they are a match, and then they really are a match to this person who is now expanding and growing. Or you just once they realize that, oh, I'm making this growth and I'm doing this, then it's like, oh, okay, well, then I guess I got to too. But either way, it pushes that person into doing their growth. It pushes that person into having the experience that they need to for their progression. And it releases this anchor, because it's like you're anchored into one another, and you're really holding each other down. But whenever you're able to stop it and say, no, you need to do your thing and I need to do my thing, then the collaboration a lot of times shows up in an even more aligned way.
Yes, 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 yes. So there's so many, there's a lot here in this space of honoring this place, because I think that is one of the biggest fears for a lot of people that prevents them from really moving forward, because sometimes there are the people that say, no, I don't want to join you on this journey, right? Mm-hmm. But then there are people who are showing up that are like, oh my God, thank goodness, right? So you meet new people, and there's always a death and a rebirth. It's mm-hmm. always this evolving thing. I think mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going back to that mundane piece that you mm-hmm. shared. Mm-hmm. That calmness and that stillness, and that where we can allow the mundane, isn't that the calmness and the stillness that allows us to touch those places of excitement and brilliance and abundance, right? The thrill, right? If we can have calmness and stillness in the mundane, can we bring that and offer that to the most thrilling, exciting, moments in our life? And so I guess that's what's coming through, is that I think it expands our capacity, right? When we can bring that calmness and stillness, no matter where we are.
Yeah, it's the same concept. It's the same principle. Having that. Noticing, like Einstein said, that you have a choice to look at it as nothing is a miracle or as if everything is a miracle, right? And so the mundane, I don't really think that there is anything that's mundane. If you think about if you look at something like a leaf, and you see all the different cells and the way that everything is coming together to form this particular thing, you can see that there's absolute magic in there, but that's not how I like to look at it, because we do get sort of jaded, and it's like, oh, it's a leaf, whatever. But I think whenever we're able to have that stillness, like you're talking about, and recognize that this leaf is actually something spectacular, then I mean, okay, it's good for its own knowledge, that's fine. But really, it's being able to realize that everything spiritual is shown to reflect the physical, right? And the physical is shown to reflect the spiritual. And so you can look at a leaf and be like, oh, okay, but you can also say, wow, look at how all the different pieces come together and form this thing, and look how that happens in my life. Look at how I am one of these pieces, and somebody else is another one of these pieces that's coming together to form this grand human organism, and whenever we're able to think of ourselves like that, then I think that the magic in the mundane is really just it's a reminder, right? Like this is just a leaf, but it's also the entire universe. And I mean, I think the coolest thing is that before, a lot of these terms and these ways of thinking were just kind of out there, and people are like, oh, and kind of tongue in cheek. But now it's like the science is catching up to these things. These ways of expressing are now there's hard scientific evidence behind it, and there's different terminology and different words about it. But it's just, I mean, the placebo effect is just fascinating. It's like it's more about, it's proving that it's much more about how we think about things and what we believe than what's actually coming into our experience. And whenever we realize that, then we realize that we're this part of this, we're the small mundane part of this magnificent, brilliant things that we can't even understand. We can try, but we can't even understand it yet with these minds. And it's going to take some ascension and some expansion before we can really, before we can step further into it. But we really have this ability to just take the next step, because that's what also our minds help us do, is just to be able to take all this information, just take the next step. And whenever we have that faith, like that's faith in everything, but it's also faith in ourselves. And that's what self-love and self-trust is. And whenever we tap into that, then we create wonders. We create magneticism and just cooperation that it's just profound. It's just profound, and we can't even understand it right now.
That's right. And I don't know that we're meant to really fully understand it at all, right? When you were speaking, you were talking about earlier in the podcast, as we're kind of coming to a close here, you were speaking to the places of how important it is for us to embrace the differences of our humanness, right? Like how different we each all are, and connecting in places of conversation, of collaboration, whatever those pieces are. When you bringing it back a little bit to that awareness, right? Our capacity to reach out to someone who's so different, to understand, like to build this bridge. What I'm feeling from this, and I haven't seen this before, is also our capacity. So I was flipped in a boat in the Florida Keys late at night. The water took on, it was a kayak. I mean, it was muddy, the mangroves. Like you think about like all the things that can, come at you. I really realized that my sense of safety, that place of safety, right? Of being able to accept that, understand what that was. And that could just be a mundane kayak ride, right? But my ability, my whole experience was showing me some stuff so deeply ingrained inside. What I'm feeling is that place of that mundane kayak ride, whatever, right? My ability to be able to embrace that and accept what that brought up for me is also the places of like, being able to stay and really like embrace the abundance of a mansion here in Southern California, and like receiving that, right? Like all those aspects of that. So it's like being able to, like, it's expanding. We're just talking about that place of expanding it. And if we're blocking those experiences that can feel mundane or, not exciting, we're also, we don't have that expansion or that capacity to really hold that place of these magic, more, whatever we would perceive as more magical, right? I guess
Yeah.
I'm just feeling this. It's a really beautiful picture that I see that you just, in this conversation that you and I have, that we just painted, of how we can bring it into our reality, like really rooting in this place of, wow, this life is magic. We are powerful creators. And when we just, like, really root into that and have these places, that's what's
Yeah.
coming through. And I just wanted to share that because I think it's really important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's to me, it's just that's why I'm self-love for impact. It's all about that. And when we realize that we are a part of this universe, right? When we realize that everything is just an aspect of us, then it really causes us to have that awareness. And it's like, well, if everything is just part of me, then I'm, and I don't have to put armor up, because if I put up walls, then I'm not creating any more safety. I'm already safe. What I'm actually doing is creating barriers, right? And whenever we have the self-love and we know that I'm the universe, and anything that's coming out of me is good, and I need to trust that, and I can honor that, and I can respond to that, because this is happening within me, and I'm the universe. So there's no way I can get that wrong. I had a teacher that once told me that you should learn to trust yourself even when you're wrong, right? And I think that's a big deal, because it's like we can trust ourselves, and we can take action, and we can believe and be in these mind states that trust ourselves, and we can realize that it's never wrong. Even if it's something that doesn't get us to where we thought we were going at that time, it takes us somewhere we need to, and that's self-trust, that's self-love, and that's also universal love, and that's how we create the amazing, profound shifts that we need in our society.
Yes. Just, David, I have so much appreciation for you and the words that are pouring through you. There's deep, deep resonance. I see the impact that you're creating in your own life, and that how that's expanding, to others. And I celebrate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to come here and speak with you.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Is there anything, in closing, is there anything that really you would like to speak to someone who is feeling some painful moments right now, or that are feeling some real places of disbelief, anger, frustration? Is there anything that you want to speak to them directly right now about?
Absolutely. If you're coming from that place of anger, disbelief, any kind of turbulence at all, I just want you to imagine, and you might not even have to imagine, you might have had this experience, but imagine the frustration that comes from being homeless in Compton with, just absolute destruction everywhere, literally nothing. I had a jacket that I had borrowed from someone. And then just to notice the shifts that I've taken, notice the shifts that people can take. And I think that was my whole thing. It was like, whenever I was laying there, I was like, I know people can do better. And I'm a people. So I can do better. And it's condensed only into 6 steps. So I think that my thing that I want to say is reach out. If it's to me, if it's somebody else who's done it, if it's somebody else who you resonate with, reach out and get help. There's absolutely step-by-step ways to change your complete outlook, your complete situation in a very short amount of time. And I say this, I don't have a horse in this race, other than I want this to happen to everybody. I believe that if everybody is abundant and everybody is clear and everybody is authentic, then it makes my life better. So selfishly, I want you to go through the steps and the processes that can help you living your best life and and coming from your most powerful place. And there are steps involved. There's absolute steps that I've gone through to get from there to here. And there's absolutely a way that we can put together a plan to make it work for you as well.
Yes, I think that's one of the biggest. It's real. That is real. Healing is real. It's not just this, oh, okay, things will be a little bit better, but no, it can dramatically shift your entire experience on this planet.
Unrecognizable. My friends, family, and myself cannot recognize me from 5 years ago.
Yeah, same. Isn't it just, it's incredible, really, when we are dedicated, committed, willing to get messy, willing to play, willing to this willingness. So thank you David, for being here today. I have the biggest smile and just filled with gratitude for you. So thank you so much.
Really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks a lot, Katrina.
Thank you.
It's been really great.
Thank you. And for everyone, share this podcast. Really reach out to David, to the places of, if there's questions, things that came up for you. And also, you're not alone in this. You can see the strong resonance that has been shared here today on the podcast. And if you resonate, you do. If you don't, you don't. But it's just really beautiful. So thank you so much again, David, for being here.
Thanks a lot, Katrina.
For sharing. Thank you.
Absolutely great.